I appreciate that the House of Commons has to go through a process that is entirely a matter for the House of Commons, and the House of Commons will start their consideration of the legislation tomorrow, I believe. What I can say is that the legislation, as published, is true to the joint framework agreement between both governments, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the speed with which it is produced. I don't wish to engage myself in domestic British politics or debates that will take place in the House of Commons, other than to say I know that the Secretary of State and the British Government are acting in good faith to give legislative effect now to the joint framework agreement. And there will be a variety of issues that people will wish teased out during the legislative process, but it's very important to the Irish Government, but it's a very important thing to both governments, because it's an agreed joint framework between both governments, that the ultimate legislation that's passed is true to the joint framework. Similarly, our legislation here will need to be true to that framework as well. So I'm happy to let that process obviously play out. It's a core part of the democratic process, but the legislation as published is in line with the joint framework agreement, and I expect both governments to honour the commitments we've given in the framework.
The reason that the protections are being put in place in the legislation is because we have a duty of care to our veterans as a government, and we honour the service of all of those who served as part of Operation Banner, in which a very large number of people, veterans, police officers and other public servants, lost their lives. What do the protections provide for? The ability to give information remotely without having to travel back to Northern Ireland. We talk to veterans, perfectly reasonable thing to do, that they should be able to do that they should be able to seek anonymity. You can do that currently in relation to a coroner's court, as you're well aware. That will also apply to the inquisitorial proceedings in the Commission, to have consideration for the agent welfare of witnesses. But a number of them do apply to others who are participating in the process. For example, members of the IUC, members of the public and others. You can't have a system where you provide one set of procedural considerations to some people, not others. But the absolutely clear reason for them, as the Prime Minister made clear, is to treat our veterans fairly, which we are absolutely committed to do, and this bill is fair and proportionate and reasonable, and I look forward to it progressing in the House of Commons.
I believe there will be full cooperation by Garda Síochána with any inquiries established in Northern Ireland. You specifically inquired about redacted sensitive intelligence information. I don't believe that is a problem that is insurmountable. When you look at the Memorandum of Understanding that I entered into with Lord Turnbull for the Omagh bombing inquiry, there's a mechanism provided within that in respect of sensitive redacted information that allows the inquiry to see that information. Obviously as well, this is an arrangement that should operate reciprocally, as is provided for in paragraph 30 of the joint framework. So it has to work both ways as well, that if there is sensitive information there held in either jurisdiction, that we should all make best efforts to ensure that that information is available to inquiries.
Tracy and then Louise from the Irish Examiner.
Thanks very much. My question is about relations in Stormont to the Secretary of State and to the Taoiseach. As you'll be aware, relations have become quite toxic between the parties in Stormont. Would you have concerns about the stability of the institutions? And even if they do manage to toggle along, would you have concerns about delivery as far as what the parties can actually, or the executive can actually agree?
Well, look, being in government anywhere is challenging, and in current circumstances it is particularly challenging. And being in the kind of coalition that there is in Northern Ireland because of the power sharing arrangements, which are fundamental to the Good Friday Agreement making progress, is particularly challenging. But I have to say, I have been really encouraged by the way in which Michelle O'Neill and Emma Little-Pengelly have been working together. I look at the progress that the executive has been able to make. I note the record financial settlement that the British government has given the executive. It's getting more than its 124% extra funding in recognition of additional needs in Northern Ireland. So I think it has the means, but all of us have an obligation to apply ourselves to improving public services, and that is how all of us will be judged, including the Northern Ireland Executive. And if they do want additional funds, it is perfectly open to them to raise them for itself.
Yeah, I agree with the Secretary of State's assessment, and I too pay tribute to the First and Deputy First Minister for their leadership. On a number of occasions, I think we've seen that demonstrated, including in very charged and difficult circumstances like the flare-up of violence that we saw on the streets of part of Northern Ireland this summer, and the joint condemnation and clear leadership that there was from the First and Deputy First Minister. We've seen progress in relation to the appointments of the Irish Language Commissioner, the Ulster Scots Commissioner, big moment, big commitment under new decade, new approach, now delivered. I did make comments at the British Irish Assembly in Oxford, where I did kind of politely encourage everybody to hold their nerve here. Elections come, and there's a while to go to the Assembly election in 2027. It's really important that people use the window now to deliver. And I want the Executive to know that they will have a friend and a partner in the Irish Government. I know the British Government will work constructively with them as well. I know both governments will work to try and assist in any way that we can as the Executive. The people of Northern Ireland waited far too long to see re-established. I think the people will want to now actually see it getting on with the job of delivering on the really, really important issues that face people in the North. And my sense of it is, notwithstanding challenges, that all parties in the Executive are committed to it.
Okay, Louise, followed by Mark from the Irish Times.
Thank you. Taoiseach, you referenced quite a number of times the case that has been lodged by some opposition councillors to the design standards for the apartments. The High Court is here this morning that Minister Brown is going to prepare a draft national planning statement for government to approve to replace those planning design standards for apartments. Is that the government stepping back and conceding to the opposition that the plan you put in place was going to not be very successful? And Minister Callaghan, I know you were asked this on Friday, but perhaps the Taoiseach was there and you didn't feel like you could speak your full mind, so I'll give you another opportunity. Do you think Micheál Martin is going to be leading you into the next general election, and would you like to replace him as Fianna Fáil leader?
So I'll go first. In relation to in relation to the apartment standards, I mean this is part of a series of reforms that the government is taking to try and ensure that apartments that have planning permission today, tens of thousands of them, that have been deemed to be unviable, not being built, get built. And we've done a number of things to try and address that viability gap. Apartment standards is one. And that's about providing a greater degree of flexibility in terms of what can be built. The VAT reduction in the budget is putting our money where our mouth is. That's two. It's been widely welcomed by industry, and you've seen people who build apartments talking about how it will deliver a boom in terms of the number. And then the third is the clarity around rent and how that will look like. So they're kind of the three big pieces we've taken, along with new national planning framework and the likes. I just need to be slightly careful because I'm not 100% sure what I can say based on what's been said in court this morning in the sense of where that's at. But the government is always happy to provide clarity in relation to our intentions. But I do think elected representatives rushing to court to try and challenge efforts in a housing emergency is regrettable. It's entirely their right, by the way, but just give you an insight. It does give you an insight. So, it's a matter for the court to deal with the matter before the courts. The government will robustly defend our plans, and the government will, of course, use the opportunity in court to provide any useful clarification that further strengthens the position of the government. The guidelines are as is. Okay. The new guidelines, it's our intention to progress them, and the government is today providing further information and clarification in terms of next steps in the court.
I think the Taoiseach is doing a very good job. I think some people forget that he led us very successfully in the general election that took place less than a year ago. In respect of your questions about the future, my response would be, I'm not a prophet. Thank you.
Mark.
Good morning. A couple of questions, if I may, to the Minister for Justice first. On the Garda Legacy Unit, can you give a sense of what scale we're talking about here? How many officers are going to be involved? The use of your phrase, a point of contact, doesn't strike me as being something that's going to be particularly proactive. So can you give a sense of, will it be simply a matter of sharing files which are requested, or will the officers be out seeking files which they can then share? And will it seek to take any fresh evidence statements from people who live south of the border, for instance? So that's on one point. And then secondly, can you say if all of you spoke about immigration, given the focus that all of you have had in recent times, and particularly in the wake of the Home Secretary's comments, and particularly in the wake of your recent PQ showing that 78% of the people coming now claiming asylum are coming across the border from the north. Have you spoken about this, and what level of concern exists amongst all of you about that fact?
Well, in terms of the Garda unit, it will not be an investigative unit. It is not the Commissioner deciding to get together a collection of Gardaí and to establish them as a separate investigation unit. That wouldn't be productive and it wouldn't be effective, because the expertise within Garda Síochána in many instances will lie within the regions where the offences took place and where they would be investigated. The purpose, as you look back at the Joint Framework Agreement, the purpose of the unit is so that inquiries in Northern Ireland will have a direct contact with Garda Síochána, that they can come to the unit in the knowledge that their requests for information can be provided there as the central authority, rather than having to identify other locations where they can go. And in terms of the manning of it, that'll be a matter for the Garda Commissioner, but I know, having spoken to him, that this is a unit that will be taken and given full resources as are required and will be very effective from the point of view of inquiries that are taking place in Northern Ireland. We did also, in respect to your second question, discuss the issue of asylum applicants and the changes that have been announced today by the Home Secretary Mahmood. I want to thank her for the fact that she gave my department a briefing on these proposals last Thursday. Obviously, there is a very significant amount of cooperation and collaboration required between the two jurisdictions in respect of asylum. As you'll be aware, that we believe over 80% of the people applying for international protection do so having come in over the border with Northern Ireland. Similarly, however, I know there's a concern in the UK that individuals arriving in Dublin are making their way up to Belfast and then going over to the UK that way. So what it does indicate to me is that there has to be significant cooperation between both jurisdictions in respect of it. But what we shouldn't accept as being permissible is individuals applying in one jurisdiction and then deciding to come to the other jurisdiction where they can also apply. The common travel area, as I've repeatedly stated and as the Taoiseach has repeatedly stated, is for the benefit of the citizens of the United Kingdom and Ireland. Other persons are not allowed to avail of it, and that's a message that I think both governments need to consistently emphasise.
Can I just agree with the Minister? I mean, the common travel area is something that we so value. It's really at the cornerstone of the relationship between Ireland and the UK. It works in such a practical way on a daily basis. It's something that we all worked so hard to protect and maintain during Brexit. The common travel area was never intended to play a role in terms of asylum seekers. And we need to be very clear in relation to that. And we value the common travel area. When you value something, you must work to protect it, to cherish it. And it makes absolute sense for the two governments to work closely together. And I must say, I'm so pleased to hear from our Minister for Justice that there was early heads up, if I can call it that, in terms of what the British government is considering. And that certainly is in a welcome and stark contrast to what happened in the past with previous British governments and the consequences that potentially had, and did have, in fact, in our country too.
So now the Secretary of State's under time pressure, so we only have time for one more question, and that's Colin.
Just very quickly, as you've heard, we did, of course, discuss the proposals that the Home Secretary is revealing to the House of Commons this afternoon. As she's made clear, this is about tackling illegal migration, making sure we have an asylum system that is stronger and fairer and can command public support, while at the same time continuing to honour the obligation we have, and we have a long and honourable tradition as a country, of offering shelter and protection to those who need it.
Secretary of State, the Home Secretary said that illegal immigration is tearing the UK apart. That's very strong use of language. Do you agree that illegal immigration is tearing the UK apart? And separately to yourself, but both of the Irish ministers here, there are some suggestions that the new immigration proposals for the UK could put the UK at odds with its obligations under the European Convention of Human Rights. Obviously, that is part of the Good Friday Agreement, that would apply to Northern Ireland. Do you have any concerns about that? And also to Taoiseach, the Minister for Justice, will you be expect any repercussions from the immigration changes in the UK for our jurisdiction? And have you asked the UK government to make any alterations or adjustments to their policy because of that?
The British government is absolutely committed to the European Convention of Human Rights, unlike other parties in Britain who want to take us out of it, and that really would undermine the Good Friday Agreement, which has seen so much progress take place. In Northern Ireland, there is, of course, a debate going on in the Council of Europe about the interpretation and application of various aspects of the ECHR. There is a great deal of public concern about illegal migration in the United Kingdom. This is undoubtedly the case, and that's why it's vital. We have a system that everyone can have confidence in, that can distinguish between those who are trying to move for other reasons by claiming asylum, when in fact the asylum system is there for people who are fleeing persecution. And, you know, for most of us, if we were having to flee the land of our birth and things got better, well, I think most of us would want to go home in those circumstances to carry on with their lives. I think it's a fair, it's a balanced, it's a reasonable package, and I hope it will win public support.
We look forward to obviously seeing how the British government intends to engage and progress on this. But it actually makes sense here to try and work together. It makes sense to learn more from each other. We as a government very much recognise the benefits of migration. I want to say that clearly too. People who've come to Ireland, who've come here, who work here, who contribute positively here, and we'll always live up to our international obligations as well in terms of protecting people from fleeing persecution. But it is okay to say that and then also say the next bit, which is we do have to make sure that we have a system that works and works efficiently and effectively. Minister O'Callaghan has been really leading from the front here in terms of turnaround times, in terms of a number of changes and improvements, and building on the work of Minister McEntee. We're committed to continuing to do that. But every country has a right to introduce its own migration policy. The British government has every right to bring forward its own proposals. But we would ask and are grateful for that close engagement, because we clearly have interdependencies here because of the common travel area.
Yeah, changes to the UK asylum laws can have an impact in Ireland and have had an impact in the past. But that's not to say that the UK can't change their asylum laws. They're perfectly entitled to change their asylum laws, and I thank them again for giving us a heads up in respect of it. However, what it does indicate is that I suppose we need to be nimble in Ireland, as we may need to change our laws and our provisions as well to respond to any changes that have taken place in the UK.
Okay, folks, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.